Well, I don't know about you, but I was certainly inspired by the presentation. What do you think, audience? Yeah. So I get to ask you a few questions. I'm sure that the audience will want to hear some of these responses for sure. So first, help us understand something. What does it mean to be a futurist? And how does one become one? Because I certainly would sign up for that job too.
It helps to have been a failed lawyer. I mean, at least that's what I studied. And it was crazy because it was the late 90s. I trained to be a lawyer because, my mother is Chinese. My dad's Irish. Don't even ask how that happened. But when I was discussing professions with her, I started talking about how I love technology, and my mum was like, listen, be a lawyer, buy yourself a laptop. So that was kind of her. So anyway, I got into that, but then, it was amazing. It was in that moment in the late 90s, it's like this moment now. The internet was first coming on, the web was exploding. You didn't need to have any experience. And I really saw that there are these moments in history where just everything changes. And I got really addicted to that. And I think that's what really drew me in to spending time trying to think about the impact of technology on humanity.
Fantastic. So what do you think are the biggest lessons learned over the last 2 years and as it relates to technology and leadership styles? I think that's an important thing that you mentioned in your presentation. And then how do you see those lessons influencing the path going forward?
I think in the last 18 months, we got a real crash course on what was important with technology and what was not. Because I think we were able to take a leisurely approach to this for the last 10 years. People like me would be on stage, we'd say, listen, we should use the cloud, we should use data, we should use AI. But it wasn't until that moment where we couldn't go to the office, staff was sick, we had huge surges in demand and shifts in behavior. Suddenly it was like, it was like a moonshot, right? Like a war effort. It was like, whatever technology is usable, let's use it. So it kind of ended that whole philosophical debate. And I think during that process, we also started to ask really hard questions about, well, what is a great culture in an organization where we can't actually all be together? What kind of leaders do you need where you have more decentralized decision making? If you're now managing an army of software bots, are you still a leader? If you're not actually managing people? I honestly think this is an interesting moment because this is really the moment now where the smoke's starting to clear, where we have a chance to kind of start with a clean sheet of paper and go, okay, what does it actually mean to have a great organization?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, moving on with the questions, I like the response, and it just made me think about this idea of this, algorithmic leader, and so you'll have to share more of those principles at some point with us. So what role do you think analytics, data, and robotics will play in shaping the future of work? If you think about it over the next 5 years and next 10 years as well.
Well, I know we were talking about this before because, in your role in diversity, you must see this as well because, you can talk about diversity as a philosophical point and no one would disagree with you. Mm-hmm. But it's not until you actually show them the data.
That's right.
And what the sources of bias can be. Do you see that?
Absolutely. I think that, as I think about the use of data, it's really important, and it helps us remove some of the emotion from many of the things that we deal with. And it also helps us understand that there is an objective way to sort of solve the problem. And so, for example, I often talk to folks about thinking like a scientist when we think about DEI, but in the past we've been so focused on the emotional aspects of it or the moral aspects, and instead of using data to help us solve it from a business standpoint. So.
See, this to me is a perfect example of what an algorithmic leader is. Like, you're an algorithmic leader in that you found a way to kind of de-escalate the emotional aspects of this debate and focus on how technology weirdly allows us to be more human. And I think that becomes really a constructive approach to a whole wide set of problems that leaders have to face. In that it hasn't replaced someone's job, it hasn't reduced the humanity of your job, it actually allows you to be more effective by focusing on the mechanics and the kind of the often the biases that live inside the infrastructure of what we do. Yeah. So to go to your question, humans and tools have always had this interesting relationship. Humans always get better at building tools that in some way improve the productivity or replace parts of work. People are terrified of it. They try to destroy those tools like the Luddites. They challenge the tools like John Henry. But at some point we accept it and we evolve and we stay one step ahead. So I think that tension between technology and human capability is a moving horizon.
Fantastic. Okay. Now we also like to talk a lot about tech, but our goal is really to keep people at the center of what we do. So what do you see as the role of people as the world relies more heavily on technology?
Sorry, what was the last bit of the question?
So what do you see as the role of people
as
the world relies more heavily on technology?
There's different aspects to it. I think sometimes people make the mistake of assuming that people-shaped skills are warm and fuzzy ones. It's just your ability to kind of, physical presence and to reassure people. But that isn't true. I actually think what humans are very good at is thinking outside of is thinking about the broader context. Because all business, all services, all technology lives inside a human context. And machines don't get it. They understand a transaction, but they don't know what pay really means. And that pay is not just money. It means lots of things to people, and the flexibility, the adaptability of that. So the ability of human beings to kind of not only spot problems or failures in the system, but to really understand the human relevance of the things we do and how to design that to be a better experience, that's a very human-shaped skill. So I see really humans as designers and architects as we go forward. Look, in the future, there's going to be less and less people, let's be honest, sitting in front of a terminal typing numbers in.